welcome to Something to Talk About. I'm Linda McNamee, and as you saw from our introduction, getting ready for back to school, and like everyone is well aware, back to school is going to look a little bit different this year. So we're going to talk about the full remote plan mostly this evening. But before I begin, I want to let you know that even though we are live, we are unable to take phone calls this evening because we want to make sure that we get through everything. But you can always email me at talk@bcattv.org. And if you send me your questions, I can forward them to the appropriate parties and someone will get back to you very shortly thereafter. We are at, it's not even Halloween yet, but we are at Skeleton Crew. Chris Flaherty is here to keep BCAT and Something to Talk About running. So thank you, Chris, for holding down the fort. And hopefully Jolie and Steph and Dominic can all come back again real soon because I miss you guys and I miss baking. Last but not least, thank you, Paul, for staying home for Daddy Date Night. Actually, I don't want to know what's going on. So anyway, thank you. And thank everyone else for joining in. Tonight, I would like to introduce my wonderful guest for this evening. We have Patrick Larkin, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Burlington Public Schools. That's quite a mouthful.
It is. Thank you, Linda. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. You know, it's like BCAT's become your second home almost with the whole back to school thing.
It's nice to see people down here in the building, so especially this late at night.
I was about to say, your car probably knows how to get to the school now.
It definitely does.
So,
autopilot.
Before we get into our discussion on the whole back to school plan, can you give us a brief introduction of where you grew up, how you came to Burlington, and how long you've been working with the schools?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I grew up in a little town called Mendon, Massachusetts, famous for a couple of things, Southwick's Wild Animal Farm and the Mendon Drive-In.
Oh,
yeah, it's been one of the few drive-ins that's been there straight through before all these pop-ups started happening.
Did you always go to the drive-ins like when you were growing up?
Always, yeah. Never.
I grew up in Chicopee and we had a drive-in, and I remember, getting in our pajamas and seats down in the station wagon, no seatbelt laws.
Well, we went through the transitions then. I don't know if you did, but we had the speaker that you put on the car window. We went to AM radio, and now we're on to FM radio sound for the drive-in.
Okay. So. No, I just remember the little speakers.
Yeah.
So, well, how long have you been in Burlington?
I just finished my 13th year. Yeah. So I was the high school principal for 5 years.
Okay.
And I had some illustrious graduates like Chris Flaherty.
Yay!
And then I've been in central office for 8 years. So I started out my education career in Mendon, where I grew up, which was kind of interesting. I started out as an English teacher and then moved to administration. And I had the weird situation of being the administrator for some of my former teachers.
That had to be weird.
That was weird, yeah. So from there, I moved on to PBD High, was my first principalship.
Okay.
And then I really feel blessed to have had the opportunity the timing worked out where Burlington had an opening with Linda Hayes retiring, and I was fortunate to get the position when she retired. And it's been a great community to work in, so I'm very appreciative.
I'm pretty happy here. I think I'll stick around.
Not a bad place.
So, okay. Dr. Conte was on a couple weeks ago, and we talked mostly about the hybrid plan.
Sure.
So we thought it might be good, and I know he had talked with you as well about talking more about the full remote plan.
Sure.
And that came kind of as the numbers. You sent out a survey maybe 3 weeks ago.
Right.
And how have those results kind of spread everything out?
Yeah, it's been interesting to see those come back. And again, we all appreciate the patience of our families, because it wasn't clearly articulated what these remote plans were going to be. Because honestly, you're building the plane as you're flying it here in this unique situation. So we understand we're asking parents to make a decision on what we're doing or what they're doing with their students, and we haven't clearly articulated what does that remote plan I'm signing up for look like.
Well, I think it was also that, it's August 1st. The world may look completely different come September 1st, so how can I anticipate what's going to happen?
Yeah, so we're trying to be as flexible as possible. it's really a unique time to try to, have your traditional schooling happen. People are going to be coming to school, even though there'll be cohorts, I know, for middle and high school, and elementary will be, all the elementary students that are coming will be at the same time. And then we have the hybrid students that are home on the days they're not in school, and then we have the full remote. So how do you cover all of those three groups with the same number of teachers is really a complicated puzzle. So that's what we've been spending a lot of time on, a lot of long hours. So
where do you even start with something like that?
Again, you start by getting the parents to tell you, do they want their students to physically be in the building? And again, I already alluded to the problem there is hard to sign up for something you don't know exactly what it's going to look like.
Yeah, what am I signing up for?
So you asked about the numbers, I think.
Yeah.
So right now we have just over 400 elementary students that are going to be full remote to start the year, which is bigger than Pine Glen Elementary School.
Which is where my kids go.
Yeah.
Or one of my kids now.
So we're in the process of assigning teachers. We're going to treat that like a fifth school almost for as long as we're not all back together.
Now, with those 400 kids, does it kind of break down evenly for grades? Or do you have 5 first graders and 50 second graders?
Yeah, I wouldn't say the percentage line up exactly. I don't have them in front of me, but it varies from building to building at different grade levels. But I think we have 3 or more across the district. We have at least 3 sections of K, 1, 2, and there's a couple that are 4 sections.
So it is like
for the remote.
Whole new school.
100%. Yeah, it's like opening a whole new school. So we're in the process of aligning teachers for the remote, and some of those may be teachers that for whatever reason can't physically come in while we're in the middle of the pandemic. And there may be others that I would like to be remote. So we're in the middle of finalizing that. And to answer a question we asked backstage beforehand was, we'll probably have those class lists hopefully by the middle of next week. Hopefully that's a late date. I know we joke about the commissioner of education, as we have a lot of calls with him as central office people, and he's always telling us he's going to get a document to us or get this guidance or that guidance. And I'm not criticizing. I get how difficult it is, but typically it comes a day or two later than we expected, and maybe Friday evening.
So now you're expecting it.
So I'm saying Wednesday, and I'm hoping it's Monday, but I don't want to say Monday because I don't want to.
And if we get it by Friday, we'll be happy.
No, Friday would be.
Well, I keep kidding around with my son because he was devastated that at the end of the last school year back in June, he didn't have his report card with the teacher listed. And I kept telling him, I said, dude, when I was your age, I'd find out on the first day of school who my teacher was. They'd line everybody up in the cafeteria and say, okay, hi, I'm, Mrs. McNamee, and I'm teaching first grade, and my class list is, and you'd all march out.
Yeah, no,
So
definitely the traditions have changed.
You got plenty of time.
Just a funny aside, there was an elementary school my children went to in New Hampshire that the principal would post the class lists. I think it was like the second week in July. And then he'd be on vacation for the next 2 weeks. So he wouldn't have to take the phone calls about it.
Where did he post them? Like on the door
on the glass
of the school?
door, yeah. He walked up and he wasn't available. Yeah, so.
Smart man.
Yes.
So we talked about roughly 400 elementary schools. So it's going to take a while to flush that out and figure out where all the pieces fall. What about the middle schools?
The middle school, I believe, is just about 130. They're just over 130 that are asking for remote to start the year.
Among the 3 grades?
Correct.
Okay.
So they've done a neat thing with their schedule, and each school runs a little differently. As you know, middle school operates in teams. Elementary tends to operate self-contained a lot of the time. So middle school, with their team approach, they were able to build remote sections into their teacher schedules. So if I'm a math teacher and say I had 5 sections, one of those sections is going to be a remote section.
Okay.
So we're able to cover all those with our teachers that we currently have, and they'll be part of a team. And if we ever had to bring those kids back, I think it would be pretty seamless the way that would happen.
So how would that work? Because the middle school has cohort A, you said, would be in school Monday and Tuesday.
Yep.
And remote Wednesday through Friday. cohort B would be remote Monday through Wednesday and on Thursday and Friday. And
Right.
then the full remote would be full remote.
Right, right.
So one teacher would be teaching math all 5 days to the same group of people?
So the middle school teachers are set up like, they're set up by discipline. So like
Okay.
a 7th grade team will have, a math teacher, an English teacher, a science teacher,
Okay.
and a social studies teacher. So again, they'll still work as a team. The only difference in the physical school, and you may have talked about this with Dr. Conti, is the teachers will switch rooms, the kids won't.
Oh, okay. Actually, I don't remember
just to
talking
stop,
about that,
just
but-
to stop the, we want to try to keep the cohorts of students
Oh,
together
okay.
and not have too much movement.
Now, how does that work academically? Because, sometimes kids are better in math than in English, and then for ELA, you might have the opposite, so your groups are mixed.
Typically, we only have tiered, started to do that in math at the middle school level.
Okay.
My understanding, and I know things change quickly, is that we're not having everybody's lost a little bit of time over the last year, so we don't think anybody's coming in ahead of things.
Okay.
So I think at the beginning it's going to be heterogeneously grouped.
Okay.
There may, again, I may be misspeaking on this, so I apologize. I would ask Carrie Purchase if there's specific questions you have about a math class.
Okay.
But I believe they're going to try to, give students, extra based on where they're at. We'll be doing some assessments along the way. We've added some new assessment tools at the middle school level that we haven't previously had, so teachers can get a better gauge on where students are at.
Okay. Forgive me for making you repeat yourself.
No, it's
So
okay.
for the elementary full remote, it would be like virtual classrooms every day.
Yes, we've
but
tried
then
to. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting your question.
And then for middle school, would it be like the same teams, or would there be like different teachers?
No, they're going to
Okay.
have the same team of teachers.
Okay.
Again, no matter which way they participate.
So how would that look? Would somebody just be like watching a monitor with their teacher like lecturing, or?
Not at the middle school. No, they're going to have set times where they're going to be able to connect with teachers when they're not in school.
Okay.
Yeah, the high school, again, some of this is being finalized. We're negotiating today, so I don't want to. I know other districts have talked about, particularly at the high school level, our schedules have changed a few times based on parent feedback, because I
Okay.
think one of the earlier iterations of the high school schedule had, the kids, Group A coming in Monday, Tuesday, and then maybe some type of independent work based on that when they were home, they would go home, have some type of independent
Okay.
assignments. And then Thursday, Friday, the next group came in and got the same lessons that the Monday, Tuesday group did,
Okay.
which over the course of the year, we're not going to get too far along in the curriculum, with that
Okay.
model.
Right.
So I think one of the discussions that's happening behind the scenes now, and it's happened in some other communities, and again, it all has to be negotiated, so I apologize for
It's like
speaking out of
negotiated
school.
with like the teacher
The teachers
unions?
union,
Okay.
yeah, because it's a change in working conditions, and
Okay.
so it's a legitimate issue. But if you could stream, like if I'm home and I'm not, if I'm a student that would come to school physically on Thursday, but I can still tune in on Monday and kind of watch the instruction and stay up
Okay.
to speed with what the content is. Then on Wednesday, I'm coming in and I'm getting new content, not getting the
Okay.
same repeat from Monday. So it'll allow the teachers to cover more of the curriculum.
Okay.
There are other logistics, there are some downsides to it, but the bottom line is, I think we all have to understand we're in a situation that's different. There's going to be downsides no matter what
Right.
the choice is, so we're trying to do what's best for the students to get them the support they need to continue their academics.
Okay. Because I'm just thinking, okay, the last time there was a pandemic was, 100 years ago.
Was it 1918 or?
Yeah, I think it was like 1918, 1919.
Yeah.
The Spanish flu.
Yep.
Nobody had access to internet or,
No.
the technology that we
right.
have today.
What did they do then?
How does that all fit in? Let's take a couple minutes to talk about technology.
Sure.
So I remember hearing that all grade levels will be assigned an iPad or some kind of tablet that they will be able to take home with them,
Right.
whereas before it was just the high school.
Right.
So if they're bringing this home and they're full remote, What about like IT support? What happens if they can't get connected? What happens if they need different apps? I mean, are you going to have to like add so much to your IT support, the help desk? Are we going to have to like multiply that?
We're hoping not to. So just the history of the iPads in Burlington.
Okay.
The high school's been one-to-one for, I think it was since my last year as principal. So that would be, we're into, year 10 maybe this year with iPads.
Wow. Now I feel really old because I remember when it was new.
And we added the middle school shortly thereafter.
Okay.
And then we built them down through the elementary schools. The only difference being everybody below the high school wasn't taking them back and forth. The high school was one-to-one. They brought them home. For resources they could access at home. And now, obviously, when this hit us last year, we need to get the students devices at home. We saw a lot of districts that didn't have the devices, and we're fortunate again. We're in Burlington. We've been given these resources. Let's get them into students' hands to make this time a little bit better. So
because it also bridged the familiarity.
Correct.
Where even though children's lives were disrupted, at least they had that one thing that was familiar with them for learning.
Right. So we took them out of the carts. Every student had one in their classroom, and we took them out of the carts, and anybody that needed one got one at home. This year we're planning on sending them all home when students go back and forth. And you talked about, if I need to add a new app. We have a new MDM that the technology department's brought in, that's called the Mobile Device Management Tool.
Oh,
so our tech department can manage the iPads remotely
that's cool.
from home.
So you don't have to call Geek Squad.
Correct.
Geek Squad.
So if a first grade teacher says, we need this app for first graders, we can push that out remotely.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how are remote students or students that will be full remote, how will they get their devices? Is it like a pickup it was?
We're going to have to. So that's a good question. You're ahead of me.
Oh, sorry.
I'm accepting recommendations for the plan now. So we have a lot of new iPads that come in like we do every summer. And right now we're in the process of setting those up. Honestly, one of the issues we've run into with a few different things, the cases, we brought some nice new cases for a lot of these iPads that have keyboards built in.
Yeah, my daughter had one of those.
Yeah.
It was like, wow.
And last we knew they were still in China. They were held up, so we're going to have the iPads, but we may not have the cases, which creates some concerns about breakage and so forth. So we'll be talking to parents about that. We'll be letting them know a plan, like we talked earlier about class lists. As soon as those class lists are finalized, we'll have the iPads for the 400 plus remote students in a location, and talk about a plan for those to get to those families.
Okay.
And it's a little bit easier to hand out the ones for the kids that are coming to school.
Exactly.
Right.
What about, did we cover everything for technology?
You talked about support, so that's a good question. We typically do have.
I used to be technologically adept, and now I'm technologically inept.
Yeah.
So.
My Dennis Villano, who's our director of technology integration, he has this slide that's like this endless road you look at that's never ending. So that's the learning curve on technology. It's never ending for all of us. So we do have a support team in place.
Okay.
We're going to try to have set hours where families can get in touch. We're also going to have a teacher assigned full-time to deal with remote issues. Like if there's people at home that need support. So we'll have somebody assigned just for that, to support the at-home, the remote learners. So again, we'll be putting things in place, and if it's not sufficient, we'll be making adjustments, because, from day one of the when we started with iPads one-to-one here at the high school, our challenge has been to make sure that we have support, quick support, not have people frustrated, because the technology is no good if it doesn't work.
Right, or if it's used incorrectly too.
Correct. So we talked. Dennis Villano did a session on one of our Thursday nights.
I did see
a couple weeks ago.
I did see that.
He's going to be running parent support sessions with his team.
Okay.
And again, we'll be taking feedback from families. One of the things that the Department of Ed said, and is a priority for us, is to make sure we have more communication with our families, more frequent communication with our families, just to find out, how's it gone the last week? What can we do better?
Right.
I think one of the frustrations for all of us in the spring is it wasn't as structured.
But we also didn't think it was going to be as long as it was.
Correct. We never dreamed we'd be here again now. But so we want to just more timely support for families, whether it's on remote learning or some issues happening with their student, whether they're in school or out. We need to do a better job with the communication so the frustrations don't linger.
Okay. As you're talking, I'm thinking about like language barriers because Burlington is a very diverse community.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of parents that are non-native English speakers. How can you overcome or compensate for that, especially in something like technology where, you know, everybody's technical abilities are different?
No, that's definitely a challenge. I mean, one of the things we do the first time a parent registers in Burlington Public Schools is there's some information that we take, whether they need any type of language services, interpretation, or translations.
It's been a long time since I filled out that paperwork.
Yeah, so we do have, you know, services that we contract with if we need to bring a translator in for a meeting to talk to a parent, so there's no language barrier. Again, we have work to do to continue to get better with that, but it's definitely a challenge, but I think we have some systems in place to help us support that. One of the things that our website, at the click of a button, can be totally translated.
I've seen that, yeah.
So one of the important things is that we don't post PDFs, because PDFs aren't translatable. So if we're going to do a document or a PDF, we need to make sure we have the accompanying translations posted, because that won't work on the website if we just stuck a PDF on a web page.
Never realized that. Wow. Modern technology. What do you know? So along the lines of the communication barriers that we might encounter, what about students on IEPs?
Right.
And some of them do require one-on-one attention or one-on-one learning. How is that going to fit in with, are those students allowed to be full remote? Are they going to have to do a hybrid? I mean,
yeah, no, it's a great question.
Opening up that whole can of worms.
Yeah, no, it's complicated. There's no easy answer. And again, IEP is an individualized education plan. So it really depends on the unique situation or the services that student needs. So again, IEP students, their families can choose to be full remote, which brings about different challenges for us. How are we going to deliver the services? So I know our special ed director, Mary Hood, has worked overtime and then some in her team chairs and staff to try to look at right now who wants to be remote, who's going to be here. We are bringing some of our special ed students in a few days earlier, some of our high needs students, because they've lost so much over the last 6 months, to try to get them an earlier start.
And also adjusting to change might be harder.
And also the transition exactly for them, getting back into the buildings before they're full with everybody else would be a benefit. So it's a work in progress, and it really does come down to the individual needs of those students. You know, you can do some speech therapy remotely pretty easily, but it's hard to do OT or PT services remotely. So again, it really does come down to the individual needs, and I know she works closely with families and has a great relationship with the CPAC to deal with, you know, larger issues that multiple families are having. So those conversations are going to continue. And again, that's clearly an area where I think every school district felt like we underserved our students from March to the end of the year.
It's kind of hard though, because, you know, I keep going back to, we really didn't know back in March, you know, kind of like filling out the survey. I don't know what's going to happen in a month. I don't know what's going to happen. So
I'm wondering
I'm cutting you some slack.
How long can we use that? We didn't know. Is there a shelf life on that?
I think a year.
A year? Okay.
Someone once told me that a job is new.
All right.
You are in a new job for at least a year. Right. So you can, you know,
we feel like we've lost it. I mean, again, and we don't want to use excuses. So we're trying to operate under the realization that, you know, it was predictable we weren't going to be back full the way we like to be with all students, all staff. So that we need to have plans in place. So it is a challenge, and again, the community's been great, very patient. So hopefully we won't have to pull that out. This is too many more times. this is new for all of us. It's frustrating,
But
it's also new for families. That's the
Right.
thing we realize. I'm a dad sending my youngest to high school for the first time, and I literally get choked up when I start thinking about the start of her high school experience. So we also try to have some empathy for the families, what they're going through. Like, everybody has a different situation. It's not the, you can't generalize in these situations. So I hope families will reach out to us with individual needs, and we'll do our best, because this is not what we all signed up for, any of us.
I like the analogy. It's like, no, we're not all in the same boat.
Yeah.
We're in the same storm,
Exactly.
but we're all in different boats.
Exactly.
You could be on a yacht, you could be in a canoe.
You're the second person that's used that this week with me, and it's perfect. It's
I think
a perfect
it works.
analogy. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people need to realize that we do have to try to empathize with other people, because we don't know what their situation is.
Yeah.
So
I know, just again, this isn't a topic that we were going to hit tonight, but
it could
I get concerned that about the mask wearing, and people are like, if a kid doesn't wear a mask, are they going to have to be a remote learner? Like, yeah, if a student consistently can't put a mask on, we're going to have that discussion. But my point is, if kids are going to be coming in, I don't know what they've been through between last March and now. If somebody's having some problems, like, we're going to talk to them and try to figure out what's going on. It's not like, we need to be sensitive.
Right, because there's some families that have really not been impacted by COVID itself.
Right.
And then there are other families who have had family members that have been sick or worse, and they're dealing with all of that those emotional issues as well.
So I just want to be careful, like, that our mentality as administrators isn't like, that kid's 5 feet away, like, pull him into the office, and I don't think I don't think that would be the case. But I just think it's going to take some time. I had a colleague who talked about, she's been going to Dana-Farber every 2 months for checkups.
Okay.
And she went in late March, and she said she didn't feel safe. She said they didn't have their procedures down. The adults were you could tell they were out of sorts. She went back 2 months later and noticed a big difference. And then she just went back last week, and she said it was like night and day.
Wow.
So my point for saying that is, we're all going to struggle with this new reality.
There's a big learning
at the
curve
beginning.
here.
We're all going to be anxious. We just want to focus on the kids and the fact that we're back there in our classrooms, and give each other some patience, and we're going to be okay. Like, we have procedures in place. We just have to get comfortable with these new procedures. So I hope everybody comes at it from that end. Like, what's the positive is, we have our kids back in some classrooms.
Exactly.
And it's not going to be the same. I'm sad when I look at the cafeteria and see 100 and something desks. So we have 100 and something student desks spread out 6 feet apart, all facing the same direction. Like, lunch was
it's like when I went to school.
Lunch was usually that time where you'd sit down with the table at your friends, and you'd hang out and talk about what's going on, catch up. And now it's going to be everybody facing in one direction. It's just sad to look at, but that's...
Need the big movie screen, Menden Drive-In Theater.
Yeah, do something.
Hey, just during lunch.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about remote, and I'm wondering, like, screen time.
Yeah.
I know it's just kind of a big topic, because I'm thinking, I've heard some people say, the kids, why bother sending your kids in, because they're just going to be staring at an iPad all day, and then the kids who are remote are just going to be staring at an iPad all day. And as educators, screen time is bad, or limit. How do you work through that whole process of what's too much screen time, and as parents, how do we back off the timers?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because we talked about sending the iPads home, but I want to be clear that I think it gets, we're going to get to it a little bit later, but it's not about like all iPads all the time.
Right.
Kids still should have opportunities to use, notebooks and have other resources.
Writing implements?
Yeah.
What?
So, no, we have to talk about screen time, and it's not good for your eyes. It's not good on a lot of levels to have too much of that. So we're talking about balance, and I think similar to we're talking about these practices with our teachers, similar to the fact that you wouldn't want to, lecture for stand there for 45 minutes and talk. You wouldn't want your student looking at you talking on your iPad, you know, if they're doing something remote, like watching you remotely for 45 minutes. So I think we're talking about, you know, breaking up instruction, you know, short bursts of like, here's a piece of instruction we're going to give, then some work, checking in with individual students, how they're doing. And we have great teachers in Burlington. So people ask about, you know, the technology. I'm like, you can have crappy teaching with technology, crappy teaching. Like it's really about
it's a tool.
The strategies the teachers use and they employ, and I feel confident that our teachers are well prepared for that.
And it's also, you know, yes, Burlington teachers, there's no denying that they're amazing.
Right.
But also for like professional development, like we've mentioned before, we are in uncharted territory. So it's hard for the teachers to get the tools that they need to be effective in the current environment.
Yeah, well, one of the neat things this week is we have teachers doing remote professional development. They had the option of coming back into the buildings this week because we still were waiting for some HVAC reports. So it didn't seem fair to ask them to come back, but they could come back if they wanted to. So a lot of our opening, Dr. Conti and I did our opening session that we usually do in an auditorium for all the teachers. We did it online, which was kind of weird for us. So I think we're all learning. We learned a lot in the spring about what works, what doesn't. This feels good, this doesn't feel good in regards to instructional practices, and I think we're going to continue to tweak those. One of the things we like about the schedules that we have in place also is on the Wednesdays, for all the schools, there's some time for teacher collaboration, which when we're operating in these new circumstances, that's going to be critical. Because after a week of instruction, we can have time for grade level teams to get together or departments to get together and talk about what's working, what's not working, share best practice. And we didn't have that time built into our normal school schedule in the past. So that's new, and I think that's something that's going to be really helpful for us.
But then you go back to the individualized students because everybody learns differently. So what works in one classroom setting might not work in the other classroom setting. So there will still be a lot of trial and error, though.
Yeah, no, and I think the class sizes are going to be decent for us right now. I mean, I think we're looking at you know, classes of 15 or so in elementary. There could be some blips, and we're trying to keep our remote classes capped at, you know, 20, but most of them are below that. So I think the numbers of students that teachers are dealing with will help, you know, individualize things as well.
I was wondering about, you know, class size remote, because I'm thinking of like on Zoom meetings where you see all these little boxes. It's like you feel like you're on the opening sequence of the Muppet Show, and you know, if you have that many students, you know,
there's some things we have to talk about in regards to, you know, those types of environments as well. Just little things I learned myself from all the meetings I've been in online is like not to try to set up the grid view. It's very distracting. Like set up the speaker view, you only see the speaker who's talking at the time. Like it's easy to get distracted. I've talked to high school students who said they weren't good at managing the distractions. So we have to have those mindful conversations with the learners about like what's working for them, what's not. And we also have some tools that will be the Google Enterprise accounts that we have will have the opportunity to add breakout rooms later in the fall, not right from the beginning, but some opportunities I think that will have more engaging opportunities for kids to, you know, have a small breakout group on whatever a topic might be. So yeah, it's going to be a work in progress.
Well, also, you know, technology is kind of trying to catch up to what our needs are right now because, again, we're in unprecedented times. So we did mention iPads. And we mentioned, you know, some of the school supplies. So in the past, parents and families have been eternally grateful for the town of Burlington, where they don't have to go out and get, you know, notebooks and pens and pencils and crayons and all. How's that going to work this year?
We're still buying those supplies. That was a good question. The elementary principals asked today, because we were talking about this remote group. And they're like, well, how are they going to get their materials? I'm like, well, we already bought the materials. We planned on them being there in the school, so we just have to get them home to them. So we did take the feedback from our families in the spring that it was too much screen time. Like, can we do something besides iPads? So we heard that, and we bought doubles of a lot of things. Like, we have double the amount of math workbooks, so they can have one at school and one at home.
Okay.
And then writers' notebooks where students would write. And we have those materials that we would give to the kids in the class. We will send home for those kids.
But I'm also thinking, like, when I visited my kids in elementary school and volunteered in their classroom, everybody was sharing the color crayons. Everybody was sharing the box of scissors, and we can't do that now.
Right.
So we have to go out and get, even more than double.
Yeah, I mean, I think teachers are trying to plan thoughtfully, and like, do I really need to get all these, or maybe I'll do something different and won't use, like, we had questions about how big are the packs of crayons we're going to buy and things like that. So, yeah, they've put a lot of thought into their ordering, knowing the situation we're in, and we're just trying to be equitable with how things are distributed.
And I know it's not on here, so please feel free to say I'm not going to answer it, but extra IT specialists, extra, apps, extra school supplies, extra. How are you figuring out the budget for all of this?
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, thankfully we have Nicole Kasha is our business manager, so she's the numbers cruncher, and it's kind of like, when you went to your parents when you were younger, like, I would like to buy this, and like crunch the numbers, like, no, that will work. But we have received some money from the government to help us, with some of the relief. Because
I'm wondering, do you have to go back to, town meeting or anything?
I think, again, I think the town's in a tough spot as well. Like, we realize we're partners, in this whole dilemma together.
Exactly.
And I mean, I think we would really try to be hesitant to ask for anything at this point that would not, it would be like, are you paying attention to what's going on right now? So that's certainly not something that we're talking about right now in regards to supplies. So again, I can't say never, but I think we're more likely to be talking about a reduction than asking for more at some point. Like, hopefully things turn around quickly, but we're trying to do everything we are fortunate in Burlington. The budgets are always very generous and allow us to do what we need to do. And I think from the school district standpoint, we're thinking like, now's a time where we need to tighten our belts and make do with what we have. And there's resources, like I said, from the federal government that we can access to help defray some of the added costs. There certainly are. But no, that's a great question. But we feel like we're in a good place to start, and hopefully, things are going to go in the right direction for us.
Because it's like, sometimes, you're stuck because you need to do this, but again,
there's needs and wants, right?
Exactly, but
so
you need to talk to
just have
Nicole. It's like, make this happen.
That's the bigger question. I think sometimes we've been so fortunate over the years, but I've been in other districts, where we haven't been as fortunate. So I think we're just trying to take stock of the reality, and again, be good partners to the town departments as well, and be like, we're all in a tough time. Let's do our best and just use the resources that we have available to us.
Got it. Looking on my list, social interaction. My son is convinced that last spring remote learning was an abysmal failure.
Yep.
He's convinced of it. Okay, he's 9, but he's convinced that this is not going to work. He wants to go back to school as much as possible.
Yep.
And I think a lot of it for him has to do with social interaction. He wants to see his friends. He wants to interact with his friends. And I know it's going to be different, but how does that play with remote students? Because they're still just going to have that screen time.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for every family. I mean, we're going to try to have classroom building activities. Our teachers are very good at that. They'll be doing it remotely and giving some opportunity for interaction with the students that they have remotely. But it's a good question. I'm hoping those families are going to give those students opportunities to have some physical interaction with kids, maybe, family members or neighbors. I don't judge anybody that's more conservative about sending their kids to school, or they may have health reasons in the house, or maybe there's a grandparent that lives there. Whatever the reasons are, it's 100% fine with us. But hopefully they are looking for opportunities for their kids to have some social interaction.
Okay.
They just don't want it with 15 other kids in a classroom.
Right. Because I'm just wondering, like, I asked Dr. Conti about, the extracurricular activities like the chess club and after-school sports. And, if people are full remote, how will they be able to participate in this and what will be allowed? And
yeah, I think our number one priority right now is getting our classes up and running.
Okay.
And then the second question is to look for opportunities for kids to connect. Again, especially like you said, the remote students are more isolated. So if there's opportunities for them, that would definitely be a priority for us to look at.
And I'm not, we're on page 2.
All right.
Difference in the quality of education of remote versus hybrid. And yes, I understand that a lot of it has to do with individual differences and individual learning styles, but educational quality of remote versus hybrid versus full in school, how will that be measured? Is it worth measuring? I mean, how do you...
No, I mean, I guess the question is what outcomes would you measure for? So, I mean, we're typically very focused on academic outcomes.
Okay.
We also have some social emotional screeners that we have at our fingertips that we could use.
Okay.
So, I think number one, I think most families, and as do we, once we get back and get our students, connected with their new teachers, sometime in the first month or so, you'll see us starting to do some assessments and where do they stand in regards to typical grade level expectations, and then focus our instruction, on any deficits that we see, and also focusing on some of the strengths that we see. So yeah, no, and we'll be measuring as we go. Like we do a lot of assessments along the way, typically, and I think we'll do the same thing, and we'll let parents know. We'll have individual conversations, and the state's still trying to decide on whether they should do MCAS.
That was going to be my next question.
I hope they never do it again, personally, but that's my...
Yeah, I know. Every person who's ever set foot in the front of a classroom thinks that standardized test, standardize the testing, but individualize the education plan. There's not quite a,
Yeah, so no, that's a great question about measuring students, and we're gonna do our best to see where they're at. And our number one concern, though, honestly, is social emotional when they walk in the door. And I think the principals are all going to put it in their first letters out to families, but we have some counseling resources available. We've added some partnership we have. It's called this interface program. We can basically find counselors that they could speak different languages if English is an issue. We know our black students have been through a lot of trauma watching what's happening nationally since the murder of George Floyd, and now Mr. Blake in Wisconsin recently. And so, again, I have no idea what it feels like, except I know that they've been through trauma. So we have, again, counseling available. If they reach out, we're going to try to let parents know, families know. So that our number one concern, getting back in, seeing where people are at, if they need support to be ready to do some of the academic work we really want to get into, then we'll have that available.
Now, speaking of communication, communication for socio-emotional education, technology. How is all of this communication happening? Is it all through email? Is it through the website? I mean, what's being pushed to the families, and what do parents have to go out and look for?
Yeah, I mean, we try to post our district-wide information on the website. We also can email it through Aspen, which is our student information system, which has all the parent emails. We have found that from our previous polls and surveys and communication that some families don't have email addresses set up. So we also have the ability to do the phone calls home. We haven't used that a lot yet. So if
yet.
Because people hate to get those phone calls, but if certain families won't get the message unless we call, then we're going to have to start doing those as well. So we're talking about ways to improve communication. You already mentioned translations, so those are that's something that we've worked with as well. Open to suggestions, but we're trying to communicate in all the different ways possible. Our Facebook page gets a lot of traffic when we post things there. You can see how many views were on a certain post that we put there, and we've encouraged families to sign up. Our district news page on our web page has an icon you can click on and you get the email. So I think that number is up to 700 and something that get it, but we have probably closer to 2,500 families or, you know.
Wow, a lot more than that. Okay.
So, I mean, we have over 3,000 students, so if I'm trying to figure how many families that would be. So again, encourage people to go to the web page and the district news. You can click on a little bell and it'll let you put your email address in, and as soon as we do a new post, you would get an email on that.
You know, we're redoing our edit suite. Maybe we could put, you know, bunk cots in there for you and Dr. Conti, and you can just do your weekly updates or daily updates, or
that'd be great.
Get the high school students in here to do their double sunrise newscast.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, again, if there's ways people want the information, we're open to suggestions. So we just want to make sure everybody gets what they need.
So, you know, looking at my list again, you know, we talked about sometimes there's a language barrier. Even though the town or the school department is providing all the students with the proper technology, do you foresee some kind of socioeconomic differences in children's learning? And is that something that we could see right away, or do you think there's going to be long-term effects on this?
I'm not sure of the question. I mean, I think we certainly have certain underserved groups historically, not just in Burlington, that that, you know, depending on the type of testing you're doing, may score lower. But so I'm not sure exactly what the question is. So
will everybody have access to the same education regardless of background?
Yeah, so our equity committee met tonight before I came up here, and that's one of the things we're talking about, like with our reopening plans, who's seeing issues that could be equity issues, what do we need to address. So we've tried to match up the schedules, both remote and in person, to try to have them be very similar. Okay. So students would have the same number of English, math classes, so forth. I know. And
it's the same curriculum whether you're remote or hybrid.
The only place where we're still trying to iron out the details is the high school. Is where Mr. Sullivan is. It's just such a unique situation where you have so many different courses kids can take. Like we talked about how the middle school works. If you're on a 7th grade team, you have an English teacher, a math teacher, a social studies teacher, a science teacher, and possibly a world language. If you're in the high school, you're not on grade level teams like that because the courses have different levels, and you may take ceramics for art. You may, you know, you're all over the place. Yeah. You're like the middle school also tends to go, like your 7th grade team will all go to the same special together, or they'll go off to a couple different specials at the same time. Where the high school schedule, the way it works is, you know, you're a 9th grader. You have, you know, you might have a lot of classes with 9th graders, but it's just not as clean to make that kind of a change. So we're working on the details. There may be some situations where students are being supplemented with online courses that aren't from Burlington teachers. Which
opens the beauty of online.
Yeah. So I mean, that'll be, you know, that's one that we're trying to finalize this week. I know with Mr. Sullivan. Because one of the things, again, I said patient with families about filling out the surveys. Like, I would want to know.
How much response did you get from those surveys?
I think we were pretty close to 90% was all when all was said and done. For the responses, and then we had to do we called all the other families that, you know, hadn't returned.
Well, that must be time consuming. Yeah.
But again, it comes back to the point of making sure that each family, because we had sent the message that if you haven't responded, we assume you're going to be in person, because the majority of people are going to be in person. But then we made the calls at the end. We had 3 categories in our spreadsheet that we had. We had remote, in person, and not responded yet. So we called the families that hadn't responded, and a lot of families had indicated, you know, I'm still trying to find out this before I make my call. So there was a lot of communication going on.
But the deadline was last week.
Yeah, the hard deadline was probably Monday, but
Okay.
yeah.
What about, please don't shoot the messenger.
No.
What kind of accommodations either have been made or are being considered for either single parents or working families, like when both parents are out of the house? I mean, how do you... I'm not even sure what to ask, but it's like, I know I am grateful in my situation that I can stay home with my kids, but I know a lot of single parents, it's like, look, if I stay home, I don't have any paycheck, or, some paychecks, both parents have to go out and work, and then hiring a tutor or having somebody to make sure that their kids attend the remote learning classes.
Right.
I mean, have there been any accommodations made or suggestions that you can give to some of these families?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, one of the
I can't even ask.
Yeah,
it right.
no, we're having those conversations, and I wish I had a better answer right now. We know it's a fact that lack of even before school care. I remember seeing an email about my husband's a first responder. I'm a teacher, young student. Like, we need before school care.
Yeah.
Like that puts people out. So we're trying to add those services as quickly as possible. I know we've had after school across the district, but it's been waitlisted. It costs money.
Okay.
The Y programs that were in Memorial, we had a Y program, for instance, that was a lot cheaper and a lot of other families utilized. But now, because of the spacing, the Y program isn't going to be able to be at Memorial.
Well, that explains
and I think they may be at Francis Wyman as well. We have a few Y program that run through the Y.
There had been one at Francis Wyman.
Yeah. So we're scrambling right now to try to see what we can do to help families out with that, but we don't have solid answers, because our number one question was, how do we get kids back to school?
Right.
But
so you've had to prioritize.
But the underlying question is
3,000 students.
Some families can't get their kids back to school without those supports being in place. So we understand the dilemma, and we're trying to get it resolved as quickly as we can. So I wish I had a better answer.
And I think if the government, not knowing what's going to happen, we don't know if once people start going back in a hybrid model, what happens if someone gets sick and all that kind of stuff. And if the government dictates, okay, no more hybrid, everybody's remote, how will that look different than what we're anticipating now with the hybrid model?
Yeah, so I think the schedules that we have in place would remain the same, except they would just go to full remote.
So teacher assignments would pretty much be the same.
Yep, and we would keep that remote academy for the elementary in place. They wouldn't. The only way things would change dramatically is if we got the all clear for everybody to come back.
Okay, which probably won't happen anytime soon.
Yeah,
I know they're testing vaccines, and there are some people who want their children to be vaccinated, other families who don't, and that's going to take time to play out.
Right. Yeah, and even the news we got from the Department of Ed the last couple of weeks about the flu vaccine, or maybe it was from the DPH, about having students would have to have their flu vaccine this year, which is a new vaccine that we haven't required. Again, I think there's some time involved. Like, it's not till later in the year. It's not like the start school, but
starts in October, I think. I mean, I
thought I heard the commitment. I thought no, they start giving them out, but I think the timeline for families is a little later. Yeah. But yeah, that's a whole nother issue.
Now, is there anything that I did not mention that you've been having meetings and want to relay to the public that I'm forgetting about?
I think another issue, which again, I think we'll hope have some concrete answers for people next week, is transportation.
Okay.
So I think we had about 40% of our families say that they wanted their students to have transportation available.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we're down on bus, like obviously space on busing is an issue. And,
right.
I don't think any concrete decisions have been made, but here's the way things have to work for us. So our rush right now is to get the class list done. So we see who's coming to school. Like we know that answer now.
Right.
But who's coming to school on what days, if it's a hybrid situation, middle school and high school, and then to start to look at bus routes, and where if the buses are too full, do we start to say, do we push out a radius? If you're inside
2.5 miles.
Inside 2 miles. No, I don't think we can go beyond.
I thought it was already 2 miles.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at.
Okay.
But so we start to look at that and see if there's certain places that, is there a neighborhood where there's a lot of kids where we can try to mix things up a little bit in regards to how many kids, like another bus in the, I don't know. It's going to be, it's another puzzle that we haven't had to deal with before. So transportation we haven't talked about, and we don't have the final plan.
Now, along the lines of transportation, I know several years ago, or maybe it was last year, I'm in a time warp, some of the school start times needed to change in order to accommodate the bus schedules. Right. Do you anticipate that being an option for this year?
I don't think so. I think we may, again, it could be if we decide. We have no idea if it's going to take longer, if it's going to, and I think what we're going to run into at schools, honestly, particularly the elementaries, is more parent traffic. Which again, I understand. You're not, if you say I don't want a bus, you're driving your child to school.
Right.
That actually helps us in some ways, because then we don't have the bus issue.
Right, but then you have to worry about.
But then we have more traffic, and it's going to be a slower unloading process.
Right.
I know Mr. Rosenblatt talked last night on the Board of Health meeting that he was on. Like Fox Hill, the kids are going to actually go into their individual classrooms through the outside fire doors. At Fox Hill, each classroom has an exit door.
Okay.
So again, that may take longer. So if it's taking longer for the Fox Hill kids to get into the school, does that impact the buses in other places? I know the drop-offs for parents, and I think the students' drop-off would be in the front for the busing students. But again, drop-off procedures have all changed this year. Okay. I'm sure there will be delays at the beginning, and hopefully as we get comfortable with them, the times start to go back to what we expect. Okay. So again, I wouldn't rule out slight changes in times, but I think we're pretty safe with what we have right now.
Now, when all of this is decided, parents like me are waiting until the last possible moment before I start stressing. Yeah. Will there be like a final, hey, school starts next week, this is what to expect? Yeah. Are you going to send out like okay, we finally figured it out? No,
our principals are working on those. Okay. Yeah, and I think, again, Dr. Conti told me he's done a lot of work with some outside groups, the Ariadne group, that did a lot of the health metrics and advice with doctors and things. But they also had some communication advice for us. Mm-hmm. And the parents they talked to said they would prefer to hear from their building principal. Okay. So we're trying to support the building principals, help proof their letters if they need it. Not that they need help, but
just making sure everybody's on the same page.
That we have similar messaging. There's not like, what do you mean you're doing that there? So they will start to see those letters. I mean, we're way behind on the typical communication we would have to start the year.
Gee, whatever.
I mean, we typically would have written our teachers' welcome back letter, in July or early August, and we were sending them the details for the remote PD, the week before, because things are such in flux right now. So
well, we're out of time.
We are.
We are. But I want to thank you.
I can go longer.
Well, I know you can, but we kind of have a schedule.
Gotcha.
So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Learned a lot, and I hope everyone at home has appreciated our conversation as well, and hopefully parents and families are feeling a little more confident in what the new school year will look like. So thank you very much for tuning in. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you around town. Good night.